Hello and good afternoon, everyone. And we are back with another amazing episode. As always, I am Tony Lynch. I'm the host of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And yes, we have another amazing guest for you guys. We keep bringing them, keep bringing them, keep bringing them. So before we get started, I just want to remind you guys that this is for educational purposes only. And if this is your first time joining, do me a favor, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, without further ado, we got my man from Simon from Mindful Men, and yes, he's here to talk about his work. And me, I'm a huge advocate of working with men in grief. So I'm saying, to be having another male up here to talk about such another in-depth topic when it comes down to men, I'm truly honored, right? What I'm saying? And this man's going to share his journey. He's going to share his story, and he's going to teach you guys a little something. So you guys sit back, grab your jeans, grab your paper, grab you a notebook and a pen, and get your questions ready, right? What I'm saying? If you guys have questions, put them in the comments. We'd be happy to answer them as we go. Now, without further delay, I'm bringing on my next guest, Mr. Simon. Simon.
Hi, Tony. How are you going?
I'm doing well, brother. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to being here. I've just been out for my morning surf, so I'm all G'd up, ready to go. I've got a lot of the Earth's energy going through me, so excited to see where this discussion goes today.
All right, brother. So as always, man, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and tell people where you're from, and then we're gonna get into your story, and we're gonna have a great conversation, brother.
Yeah, it sounds good. Well, for anyone who's listening who's not familiar with the accent, I am from Australia. I'm currently living on the Sunshine Coast in beautiful Queensland, just on the east coast of Australia. I'm not from Queensland. I've actually moved around Australia a fair bit, lived in 3 or 4 different cities. But yeah, we've been up here for the last few years. I've got a beautiful young family. So I'm a dad of 2. My daughter is 4. She's just turned 4, and my son's just about to turn 7. So a very young family, and yeah, just loving life and looking forward to talking about men's mental health, because that's what I do in all my platforms and my own podcast, and also in my therapy business as well. So
let's talk about your journey and how you got into mental health and became the man that you are now, as such a strong advocate about talking and helping men with their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a long story, but I'll try and cut it short for the audience.
Take your time.
Take my time.
We got time, man. Take your time. You know what I'm saying?
It's 40 years in the making, and I turned 40 last year, and a big milestone for me. But as I get older, I start to reflect more on life and where these pivot points have been, where my forks in the road have been. And looking back on my life, it really started in early childhood. So up until 8 years old, my mum used to say I used to be this happy-go-lucky kid. I used to be one of those guys that nothing would faze me. I'd always have a smile on my face, always be laughing, always be happy, and all that type of stuff. But at 8 years old, something changed, and I developed this thing called Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. But I didn't really know what that was. In fact, I didn't know what that was until I was 28 when I was diagnosed. And so I lived for 20 years with undiagnosed OCD, depression, and anxiety came along for the ride as well. And during that period of time, I really lived 2 lives. On the outside, I wore a mask that I was okay, that I was strong, that I was tough, that nothing would faze me. Kind of even had that persona of the happy-go-lucky kid. I was always laughing, carrying on, and joking around. But internally, I was very much of a shell of a person. I was pretty much broken. I struggled a lot with my mental health, to the point where, and I'm going to, I guess, prompt everyone who might be affected by suicide discussions right now, because in my teens, it got so bad that I wanted to end my life. And I found alcohol around that time as well. And so that kind of numbed things, that kind of kept me sane, if you could say those words. And it all came to a head in my late 20s. My now wife encouraged me to go and seek mental health support, which I did. And it was a really hard discussion to go into a doctor's office and say, I think I've got a mental health condition. I didn't really know what that meant. I certainly grew up in a period, during the 80s, 90s, and 90s where we didn't talk about mental health. In fact, it wasn't something that was encouraged for boys and men to talk about, and women as well. It just wasn't around. It wasn't a discussion until the last few years, particularly in my circles. But saying that was really hard to this doctor, but the doctor was really good. Did a few assessments and then referred me on to a psychologist. And through the psychologist is where I got my diagnoses of the OCD, the anxiety and depression. And all of a sudden I can put a name to how I was feeling. I could understand a little bit of what was going on. But like a lot of guys who come into therapy, I kind of walked in and wished for a magic wand result. So, yep, you're going to diagnose me. We're going to have a bit of a chat. I'm going to go away and I'll be healed. Well, that didn't happen. And so for the next 10 years, I was on a bit of a healing journey, trying to find what worked. I thought alcohol worked for me, and it did for some time. But what I've since discovered, since turning 40 and getting sober, is that alcohol was just masking all the things that were going on inside. I was never actually dealing with the mental health conditions or the scenarios that might inflame those mental health conditions. Never really grieved or really reflected and understood why I am the way I am and how I can actually be better without things like alcohol, like what healthy things I could do to cope and manage as well. And so that journey over the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions about what it was like to go through any of those periods. But coming out of that journey, I really wanted to work in the mental health space. I wanted to help other guys just like me who maybe have gone through a long period where they're not sure how to talk about things. And I wanted to be those ears for them to share their stories, and maybe I can provide some guidance or some tips or some tricks or some information about how they can manage their mental health. And so that prompted me to go and study social work. So I did a postgraduate degree in social work as a master's level, became a social worker a couple of years ago. And it's interesting because I left my old 15-year career that was safe, that I didn't have to worry about where the income was going. And I started a business, in my late 30s. All of a sudden I had to replace my income so I could still pay the bills and pay my mortgage, put food in the bellies of the kids. And it's been a whirlwind last year and a half of private practice. But the business is growing every day. And I'm looking forward to this year because we've got some big things planned. So in a nutshell, that's how I got into mental health space, but also a little bit about my mental health story.
Yeah. Wow, man. There's you touched on a few things, right? That I often, when I talk with men or talk with women, and I bring these things to the forefront, right? You know what I'm saying? First, the depression, the anxiety, the alcoholism, and I often say addiction, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because a lot of times that's part of it, and a lot of people neglect it, or refuse to call it what it is.
Yeah.
And so when I go and I educate the female counterparts, I go, maybe the perception is not the reality, right? What you're seeing right now is not the reality of what that man is going through. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, let me ask you a question. Since you've known this man, how much stuff has he been through? How much do you know about him? Now, see, when men first meet women and vice versa, we're pretty open to a certain extent until you prove to me that I cannot talk to you anymore. And that's when I close up, right? And it's like that across the board when it comes down to men. When it comes down to mental health, we don't want to call it mental health. So, I commend you on actually recognizing that and going, no, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. It is a mental health thing, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, these are the symptoms and this is what I went through. And, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I always tell men, you're not crazy. You have to heal what's going on up here in order to heal what's going on in here. So you can learn how to show up. Right. And I don't think we know, in a lot of cases, since this is such a new thing, right? When we think about it, mental health, and we pretty much, I'm 9 years older than you, so we pretty much grew up in like almost the same era, right? You know what I'm saying? The 80s, 90s, things like that. Parents are boomers. We already know how that is. We get our butt whipped. Be in by the street way before the street lights get on, right? You know what I'm saying? and we all know this old term. Boy, you better shut up before I give you something to cry about.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
I need you to put a foot in my butt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I talk about that as a good old times, right? Good old times. But when we think about it, right? Yeah, it's good old times. But if you compile that with the life of an average man, that's a lot, right? That is a lot, because in that generation, we was taught not to cry, right? We was always taught this doesn't happen to young men. Buck up, man up, suck it up. Young men don't cry, right? And again, that famous saying, you better start crying before I give you something to cry about. And then he pop you again, right? You know what I'm saying? And I go, I get it now, because I go too after something like that. You know what I'm saying? We can't express ourselves emotionally, so we express ourselves physically, anger, irritability, frustration, fighting all the time, right? And that's what I mean by perception versus reality. Now, you know what I'm saying? In the mental health field, what are some of the things that you can add to that? So, you know what I'm saying, for those who are listening, those men out there, they can begin to become self-aware of what actual mental health, mental illness looks like, right? You know what I'm saying? And let's put a face to it. Let's put some names and faces to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up like the family unit and how mental health discussions were held in the family unit. Mine was very much similar as well. And as a social worker, context is really important. It's really important to understand context, because where and when and how you grew up often influences how you are as an adult. And then maybe if you're a parent, how you parent as well. And so growing up in the 80s and 90s for me, and the noughties, I grew up in a working class, environment in the northern suburbs of a place called Adelaide. So if you think about all the cities in Australia, Adelaide is kind of often referred to as a place. It's a bit behind the times. It's a bit old school. It's working class. There's not a lot of wealth in particularly where I grew up. You got a lot of single parent households, a lot of crime. You got a lot of welfare, people that are unemployed, people with substance abuse issues as well. It's rough. It's a rough area. And so how the environment within the household, if you're talking about mental health within the household, that's also then amplified in the community as well, because you've got to be tough, you've got to be strong. To live in that kind of environment, you've got to get through every day. It's a battle, it's a constant battle. And that's again reinforced in the schoolyard with your mates or with your teachers or anything like that. You show a bully any sign of weakness and you become the continuous target. And for me, growing up as well, I played a lot of sports, so Australian rules football. And if you were to show signs of weakness on the sports field, you'd be the next target as well. Or your coach might really rip into you. And then after the game, your dad might really rip into you because you didn't perform at your highest peak as well. And so all these influences are causing us to bottle it up, to suck it up, to be a tough man. And then you'd add in media, and this is in a time before social media and before the internet. And I feel really old saying that, but it's what we watched on TV. So for me, it was, I had two older brothers, and they dictate what was on the TV. So the movies that would come on are The Terminator, they're Die Hard, they're Rambo, they're Predator. These are hyper masculine, alpha male type movies that we're watching. Me and my little brother, we would watch wrestling. So we'd watch WCW or WWF at the times. Now, I don't even know what it's called these days. But we watch that. It's stuff where guys are just ripping into each other. Maybe they're getting hurt, but they're still persevering. And it's glorified by the commentators in the sports, if it's sports, or in just how maybe the main character of like the Terminator or Die Hard, like they're just celebrated, they're awarded, and all this type of stuff. And so as a young boy, you embody this. You go, okay, this is what it means to be a boy and man, to suck it up, because all these things are telling me that I need to suck it up. is to be tough. It's to be someone who can be punched or could be shot or stabbed and still survive and still save the day. But what happens if you're not that tough kind of boy? What if you're a bit emotional? Well, you dare not share that as well, because then you'd be labeled a girl or gay back in those days. And so it was a lot of boys and guys now, men that I work with in these days, they're still kind of trying to process that from their younger years of, I was taught this, but I was quite the opposite. I wanted to share my emotions or feelings. I wanted someone to talk about it, but they just didn't have that person to do it. So understanding your context is the first part. Just reflecting back on life, like what happened in your younger years. Did you have a positive male role model, for example, in your household? Or did somebody in your household talk positively about mental health?
Mm-hmm.
I dare say in a lot of cases, not so many households did that. There might have been someone who might have had a mental health condition, or even a psychosocial disability, things like schizophrenia or things like that. Someone who's neurodiverse, autism, which is becoming a big thing at the moment. A lot of people are getting diagnosed late these days, but back in the day, less and less diagnoses. So we didn't have the information about it, and so we perceive the world by the influences of the world around us. And for me, it was that rough suburb and the influences from sports, school, family, and what we watched on TV. And then you bring that into modern day, and these days, like, we live a nomadic life. And so we don't necessarily grow up where we don't live where we grew up. And that's the case for me. I live on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, but I've lived in 4 Australian states and territories. And I don't really have that close community feel around me. And so my world is quite small compared to generations and generations ago, maybe the baby boomers and before, where they were born and they grew up and they had this community around them and they never left. They stayed put and they have a lot of supports around them. And so they can go to that person down the road who they've known for 20 or 30 years and have a chat. Whereas someone like me, to do that, to knock on my neighbour's door is quite of a weird thing in 2024, because we're quite isolated in our communities.
Okay.
And so what this generates is a sense of loneliness. And so the loneliness starts creeping in, and we go, who can I talk to? How can I talk about these things? I grew up in a period of time where I wasn't allowed to talk about things, or particularly for guys, I've been conditioned this way. So we find solutions in other things. We talked about alcohol. It could be drugs. It could be gambling. It could be sex addiction, food addiction, shopping addiction, all the addictions and so forth. You mentioned anger before. If we look at, I'm in Australia, so Australian data, so family and domestic violence data, something like 95% of victims say that the perpetrator of family and domestic violence is a male. And so what's coming up there is anger, this unknown way to cope with what's going inside, and so it just releases as anger. Maybe they grew up in a household where they saw dad beating up on mum, or granddad beating up on grandma, or that's because that's how it was, and the man was allowed to be angry, and it's behind closed doors, so nobody ever saw it, and the mum just sucked it up because that was her role.
I want to add to that, right? You know what I'm saying? Because I totally agree with what you said. You know what I'm saying? And I just want to add another element to it as well, right? So you said, and this is cut and dry across the board, Of course, when it started to switch around now, you know what I'm saying? Women are starting to take the reins and beat men up in relationships now, right? So that says a lot about where we're at in life. But yes, the male the rate of domestic violence with men is pretty up there. Now, granted, yes, I do agree. They could have grown up in a household where they're watching the male figure in their life beat up on the women in their life, right? You know what I'm saying? And like you said, mom or auntie, sis may have just sucked it up or whatever. But now, to add to that, and we go back to how men are treated when we're children. The perception versus reality. Perception is anger, the violence, things like that. What if the reality is since we were kids, we get our butt where we get told to man up and things like that. So what is our go-to? Is to puff up, right? You know what I'm saying? Go punch some walls, maybe go out and punch and fight somebody, right? And you know, whoever we hurt the people that are closest to us. That's a given. So what if you add in the fact of men don't cry, but this is the way that we express ourselves. When we look at the anger as an emotional outlet, like crying, I need maybe that's the way that, you know what I'm saying, maybe they grew up in a household where they got their butt whipped all the time, right? You know what I'm saying? And every time they cry, so they learn how to internalize, and you know what I'm saying, with an outward physical outlet, right? You know what I'm saying? Fighting, breaking things, you know what I'm saying? Busting your hand up. And that became a way of expressing.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's that conditioning. So we're conditioned to release the emotion in that way. So the healthy way, and we talk about unhealthy ways, and that's that toxic masculinity discourse that's around. It's that bravado alpha male who doesn't care, you know, narcissist type personality. Whereas that's just that's the unhealthy. But the healthy way might have been when you were that for me, that 8-year-old boy, crying it out, talking about it, and sharing about it, because maybe the next 20 years wouldn't have been so tough. And now, me as a dad now, you know, I've got a 7-year-old boy, or an almost 7-year-old boy, and some of those ways that I was parented come out automatically because that's how I learned from, you know, how to be a parent from my parents. And so it's what we know. We're conditioned in a way, and it starts young. It almost starts from day one when we're born, because you come out of the womb, and in most households, the boy gets a blue t-shirt, the girl gets a pink t-shirt.
Right.
And they're conditioned from day one. Oh, you're a cute little boy, or you're a beautiful little girl, and so on. Imagine if you were 5 or 6 and the t-shirts were swapped. And so your girl might get a blue t-shirt, and people just laugh that generally off. They go, oh, you know, maybe she's a bit of a tomboy. That's okay. Put a pink t-shirt on the boy, and it's a very different conversation.
Right.
And so, you know, people start questioning, why is he wearing pink? What's wrong with him? What's going on? And he might just like pink, you know, but, you know, the society impacts come on there. And I'm glad you brought up that there are instances of men getting beat up by women.
Right.
And that's important to note, because even though the data says that 95%, in particular, and this is Australia, of victims say that the perpetrator is male, I've read research through my social work degree in that men that present to hospital through a family and domestic violence, I'm getting my words all mixed up here, situation, would rather say that it was a work injury, or they just fell, or something like that, than say, oh yeah, my wife beat me up. Because they're conditioned to believe that that's weakness. Oh, a girl beat you up.
Well, I want to shed a little light on that. I totally agree, right? Because, you know what I'm saying, as men, so if we get beat up by a girl, I'm not telling you I got beat up by a girl. You know, I'd be the laughing stock of the playground, right? You know, but I think a lot of that too, as a young man, the single parent home, right? Most single parent homes are mothers raising young men. Now, here's what a problem. You can teach me how to be a good person, but you cannot teach me how to be a good man. Because for one, your nature prevents you from teaching me the things that I need in order to understand what a man is. And what ends up happening, and please don't get me wrong, there are a lot of single mothers out there that are doing their best to raise single, beautiful, respectful young men. The problem is that they're raising their young boys to be the men that they needed in their life. Right? You know what I'm saying? So if I could teach my young man to be the sort of man that I want, every woman out there wants that, right?
Yeah.
So when they call themselves being disciplined and things like that, you're going to be a little bit more stricter on me, right? If I go out here and climb the tree and I jump down and I rip my pants after mama just told me, boy, don't go out there with them clothes on. I got to come in with these ripped up pants on, and mommy's gonna put a foot in my ass. You know what I'm saying? Let's just call it for what it is, right? And she gonna put a hurting on me. You know this just as well as I do, right? Now, in their mind, is discipline because we're young boys, we're tough, we could take it. Now, fast forward, we get into relationships. The definition of that discipline now becomes something different because now we model the relationship off of what mother taught us. And if mother whooped my butt, then of course my woman needs to whoop my butt to keep me in line. Right? And so, yes, when that woman turns around and she can stand up for herself, because it's vice versa, the roles of vice, reverse, right? You know what I'm saying? In some places, the man is like going to egg on his woman, you know what I'm saying? In some places, the woman's going to egg on the man, right? Depending on the relationship that they have with their parents and what's been taught to them in the household. So when we think about, you know what I'm saying, is it possible? Yes. Yes, you know what I'm saying? It's just a matter of being around that individual for a long period of time and initiating that repetitiveness to where it becomes normalized. So as adults, yeah, these are the things that play themselves out. So does it happen? Yes, it does. Men do get into abusive relationships, and they tend to stay in there and play the woman role. It's okay. I fell down because ain't nobody going to believe us anyway if we tell them that woman whipped my butt.
Yeah.
Especially if you're 6 or something like that, you know, ain't nobody going to believe you.
Yeah, it's an interesting discourse because in the social work groups that I'm a part of and the networks, as soon as I start talking about this aspect of family and domestic violence, they arc up and they say, well, no, this is a male problem. I'm like, well, for a lot of it, yes, it is. It's a lot of, but a lot of it is not necessarily their fault. It's just how they've been conditioned throughout their life. And so this is just them expressing. So what we want to do is build a new generation of boys to become men who can confidently and healthily show their emotions as well, so that we can lower that data, and we can encourage more guys who may be victims of family domestic violence to come forward and say, yeah, I'm a victim of family domestic violence. And so that number is not in the 90s. It's not saying all guys are evil, because all guys aren't evil.
No.
You know, there are a few bad eggs, but there's a few bad eggs in everything that happens. And so understanding these contexts, you know, what it was like in the relationships, or were you in a single parent home? How were you raised? What were the social factors? What was the discussions like around mental health? This is that reflective part. This is understanding your context. So guys that are listening who are going, okay, maybe I've got a mental health. Let's look at my context. Let's look at all these things, how I was raised, when I was raised, what influences me, what are my beliefs, what are my values, and where did they come from? You know, if I value love, was that something that I received when I was growing up? Is it something that I receive now, and so forth? So these are all context questions that we can ask ourselves. And sometimes it can be a bit tricky. So this is where therapy comes in. You can come in and work through this. And this is often what I do in the first few sessions with guys, is go back through history and go, okay, where does your story start? Where is the starting line for you? For me, it was roughly around 8 years old. For other guys, it's earlier. For the other guys, it's later, and that's fine. We work out where the story starts. But often you start with a story, and then you work out there was a few books before that, before that as well. So you go through those. So understanding that, but then it's also understanding how you're currently showing up. So to get back to your early question, is like, what can we look for? Look for the context, understand the context, but then, okay, how are we currently showing up? What are we currently feeling? Do we currently feel like we're stressed on edge and ready to blow up like that volcano? If that's the case, maybe it's time to start talking, because talking definitely helps. Are we drinking too much? Are we smoking too much? Are we doing too much drugs? Are we doing any of the addiction stuff too much? Are we exercising? Are we eating right? These are very basic things that we can just check on and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm drinking every night. And for me, you know, a Saturday night drink would turn into a Friday and a Saturday night drink, and then a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday drink, and then it might be a weeknight drink as well. And that's red flags for me to go, you know what? I'm stressed to the max, or I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, or whatever. Or maybe my OCD's flared up and I'm not sure how to deal with that. maybe I need to go on medications, or maybe I just need to go do some talk therapy, or exploring different things. Like I mentioned surfing right off the top of this thing, going out and doing some surfing. It's doing some physical activity where you're getting vitamin D, you're getting good earth energy, recharging your batteries. How many guys as you become adults lose the ability to have fun? Like, what do we do for fun?
That's
I've got a guitar in the background. I play that. I'm from the video game era, so I play video games sometimes. But surfing is my thing at the moment. I get a lot of energy from that, and so tuning into these things and going, you know what? If I'm not exercising, if I'm doing the addiction stuff too much, if I'm stressed to the max, I'm not sleeping well, I'm not eating right. These are all signs where you can go, okay, maybe there's something underlying here that I need to address because I'm not feeling good. Most people who aren't doing all those things, they're not feeling great. They're not generally people who are like, yeah, I feel on top of the world because you're filling your body with rubbish. You're not fine tuning it. Maybe you're watching stuff on TV or consuming too much news or not good stuff that's just bringing you down. And maybe you're in negative loops all the time. So maybe it could even be in what you're saying and how you say it. If your conversations are all negative all the time, that's a sign that maybe something needs to be talked about. Or if you see the glass has always been half empty instead of half full, maybe that's just a sign. These are everyday things that you can tune into, and this is the beauty about mindfulness. And this is why I love it. It's just the art of conscious living. To take a quote from John Kabat-Zinn is tuning into your everyday life and going, okay, what works and what's not working, and then working on the things that don't work so that you can do more of the things that do work.
I love that, man. I really love that. And I love the fact that you mentioned mindfulness, right? Because again, when you think about mindfulness, another element is showing up. It's showing up in it as your authentic self. Now, and you also mentioned the addiction aspect as well, right? And I think that's where it gets kind of tricky, because sometimes people don't know that they're addicted, right? Because the average person, if you're on the outside looking at your friend go out drinking and drugging, you know what I'm saying? And what you're seeing is a progressive, you know what I'm saying? Is a progressive state. You may see him one day, 2 beers, right? You know what I'm saying? 2 beers, maybe smoke some pot or something like that, right? And he does that for maybe about a couple of weeks. Okay, not a problem. We he's a human being. He's a grown up. He's responsible for his own choices. Then you may see him after that first or second week, maybe the third week, he's now drinking 4 to 6 beers every 5 to 6 hours. Right? You know what I'm saying? It's a quick progression. So you're watching this. Now he's upgraded from smoking pot to maybe doing a little coke. Maybe he's popping a few pills. You know what I'm saying? Maybe. And now here's the fun part, right? Because when you ask him, hey, are you okay? Yeah, man, I'm gonna go out and party, man. I got these girls. Now these are things that he's never said before. And the people that he's usually hanging around has now changed again. Right? You know what I'm saying? Now he's hanging out with the people who are more hardcore into these things, right? The women and things like that. So now here's the different elements. He has the addiction aspect. He has the drinking. He has the switch of company. And he's added women into it. Now, when you look at those 4 elements right there, the average person will look at that and go, oh, no, he's totally fine. He's just being a male. Right? You as someone close to him would go, no. No, this is not good. This is destructive. Oh no, he's just being a male. Now, when you go and ask that individual, and if you've seen the interventionists or interventions where they go in and they trap the person, they go, I don't have a problem. And I think that's where we can sometimes come across that bump in the road, that pushback, because you can't convince someone who doesn't see what they're doing as, you know what I'm saying, following a path of addiction and destruction, when they don't notice it themselves. This is
Mm.
just totally normal.
Yeah.
And
And that
you
was
being
me
a
for
40,
25 years.
right.
Yeah. And,
And
and the reason like, I got sober last year was because, I turned 40 and I'd been kind of thinking in the months leading up to like, yeah, I'm drinking too much. I'm a therapist. I talk about this with the guys that I speak
Mhm.
to that, but I'm not really walking the walk. I'm talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And my kids would start saying, my little kids would start saying, "Oh, Daddy, it's the weekend. Are you going to get a beer? Are you drinking tonight?" Or, "Daddy, why is Mummy driving to this thing that we're going to?" I'm like, "Oh, that's because Daddy's had a few drinks and all this type of." And these started to plant seeds in my head. I'm like, oh, I don't like these conversations. But on the outside, I was like, no, I'm okay. This is perfectly normal. And when we think about alcohol, for example, it's the only drug in the world that we take that is actually socially unacceptable if you don't drink. In a lot of
Yeah,
cultures, like particularly Australian culture, we have a big drinking culture. So if you rock up at the pub and you're drinking soda and lime, people will start looking at you going, "What's wrong? What's going on?" And they want to hang out with the booze heads who are drinking and getting drunk and partying on. And so when I turned 40, this all came to a head for me. This was like my bump in the road where I actually crashed the car. I thought, okay, it's my 40th birthday. It's a big birthday. Like that's like once in a decade you turn, something with a zero behind it. Maybe I'm going to get some pretty cool presents. And the
yeah,
presents I got were cartons of beer or craft beer. It was all stuff that I like. But I said to my wife, I said, what's all this? And she's like, it's beer. And I'm like, why did people get me beer for my birthday? And it's like, Simon, that's because that's how they know you. That's what they identify you with. And that was that straw that broke my back. I'm like, I don't want to be identified with this. I've been using alcohol and I've been pretending like it's fine and I'm fine and I'm all good and I love the taste and I do love the taste. But when I drink too much. I drink to the point where I just feel numb and I wake up the next day with a lot of anxiety. They call it hangxiety. It's like kind of a hangover effect, which just is amplified by anxiety of what I might have said or did or whatever, and trying to piece the parts together. And for me, linking it in with my OCD, like I would ruminate so much when I've had a big night, for example, to the point where reality gets distorted and I don't actually remember what was true or what was not. And so these things scared me, and particularly with the kids saying, associating with me alcohol, my friends and family associated with me with alcohol. I'm like, I can't do that anymore. Why am I doing this to myself? I need to I need to live from that authentic self. I need to be that authentic version of myself and not hide away from, yes, if I'm feeling down or I'm feeling anxious or whatever, got to name it to tame it instead of just burying it deep with alcohol, with my mask, which was alcohol.
I can definitely understand that. And I think you worded it just perfectly. You know, because I can drink, right? And I never met a beer or a hard drink I didn't like.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about it is that I can drink. The problem is I'm really good at it. I'm really, really good at it. So I used to be the type of dude. I can drink a liter of tequila to myself. I used to buy the tall boy 36-pack tall boys and drink two of those a day, right? And that's just a drink, right? And that's just me. Then I would get another like liter of maybe vodka, gin, or something like that, and I can hide that somewhere in the house so I can have. So when I'm sitting down, I can just have a simple cocktail. By the time I realize I'm already done with that bottle, so now I got to go get another one, right? And that's not even including the tall boys of beers that I have sitting around. But now on top of that, that's not even including the little packs of shooters that I done bought and hid around the house. So no matter where I go, I can grab one and take a little bit of a drink. No one ever even knew I did it. That's how crazy it was, right? They were like, "Oh, Tony, would you like to drive to the store?" I'm like, "Yes, I would."
Yeah.
Knowing that I'm wrong, I shouldn't be out there on the road driving, but it didn't affect me. Like I used to watch people who were so-called drunks and alcoholics. I used to watch them get drunk and fall out. And I just go, well, he's not going to finish this. And I've just drank as much as they have, and I'm still walking around driving, things like that. I've gotten so lucky. I do not recommend people do that. Um, that is a scary feeling. And then you talk to someone who doesn't sleep, right? You know what I'm saying? So this is what I do on a 7-day basis, almost 22, 23 hours out of the day. That's a scary feeling.
Mm.
And it wasn't. I didn't think I had a problem. I didn't think I had a problem, and no one would have been able to convince me that I was an alcoholic. You know what actually got me? My son was my intervention, right? You know what I'm saying? I was partying one night, and I forgot that he was there. It was negative 13 degrees outside. I forgot that he was in the house with me. And so when it came time, I was like, hey, I'm on my way home, guys. I'll see you guys later. I'm over at my buddy's house, we're partying. And my little dude, he done grabbed his coat, he done ran out to the truck. He done jumped in the truck, and I done jumped in. And I'm driving, and someone said, look over. And I looked over, and he was holding on to the door. And they looked at me, I said, you all right? He goes, yeah, I'm good, Daddy. And I sobered up for that quick minute. And I stayed sober. And that's when I made that commitment. I said, look, if you allow me to get home and keep him safe, I'm not worried about me because I'm responsible. I did this to myself. But if you allow me to get home to keep him safe, I promise I'll never touch this again. I went home. I made it home. I poured out everything in the kitchen, poured it down the sink, and I never touched it since then. And I think that was the self-awareness, right? You know what I'm saying? And sometimes it takes something a lot worse than that. I have a buddy who advocates with DUI offenders, right? This man lost his mother in an accident when he was 16 months old, and he remembers it. Cut the car in half, and he was thrown out. You know what I'm saying? Injuries all over the place. And he lived, but he lived with half his brain, half his skull. Amazing guy. So when you hear stories like that, is that what it takes for us to understand to get ourselves put? And I love this terminology right here, right? You put yourself in check. Check yourself, right? You know what I'm saying? Check yourself. And when I say that to people, they're like, oh, what do you mean? Check yourself. Check yourself, put yourself in check. Because once you put yourself in check, you need to take a look at it on the outside of you, not everyone else. Stop paying attention to it, but look at you, right? Go look in the mirror. Go, and if you like what you see, I love what you see. When you get done liking and loving what you see, you're going to start hating what you see, because then you realize, just like most of us, our mental health is not good, right? You know what I'm saying? We're running from things. We're running from, the abuse. We're running from being molested. We're running from the narcissistic relationships, right? You know what I'm saying? All of these things play a role in it. We're running from the pain of the depression, of the confusion, of the schizophrenia. You know what I'm saying? And we have to escape one reality in order to go to the next reality. Seems to be a common thing across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't need to run anymore. That's the thing. Like, we did that for so long. We buried it deep. We ran away from it. But I think what COVID taught us is that we can actually talk about this stuff. And one of the big things, I mean, I'm not sure what it's like over there for you, but over here in Australia, everybody was locked down for months on end, and multiple times. I feel sorry for our counterparts in Victoria, who I think had some of the longest lockdowns in the Western world. But what it taught us is that we can become isolated. It taught us the need for connection, for one thing, but it also taught us that it's okay to talk about your mental health. And businesses were checking in with employees around the country, around the world, saying, how are you going? You're working at home, you've been there for 3 or 4 months or whatever. How are you going? And it enabled, I think, a lot of guys to start talking and going, you know what? I'm not doing okay. I've been locked in my house for months on end. I can barely get my groceries at the store. We had a major toilet paper shortage in Australia. I think it went around the world. I think it's similar to you guys over there. But the basics, when the basics weren't there for us, the things that we took for granted, our worlds collapsed. And so I think it's enabled us to go, you know what? I'm a man. It's 2023, 2024, 2025. Whenever you're listening to this, I can now talk about things. It's okay to talk about. We don't have to run anymore. We can actually run, instead of running away from all the things we want to leave behind, we can actually run towards a better version of ourselves.
Right.
And that starts with checking yourself. It starts with understanding your context. So looking yourself in the mirror and going, do I like what I see? And if you don't, then going, I can change this. We can change this. There are things that I can do, whether it's the basics, like we talked about, the food, exercise, addiction, all that stuff, whether it's the connections that we've got. You even talked about people changing their connections into more toxic connections, people that go chasing higher highs, for example. Maybe we've got too many toxic connections. Maybe we need to embrace some more authentic, nurturing connections in our life. And for guys and for adults, it's really hard. And we talked a bit about loneliness. Maybe we don't have a close friend that we can talk to. And it's really hard for guys, and I've been doing this lately, is trying to make friends as an adult. It's a really weird and unusual thing to do in a lot of cultures. And so I've been actively in the last 6 months, this is happening with the surf thing that I'm doing at the moment. We started a little surf crew, and I've been inviting people into that. I say, hey, on Wednesdays, I'm going to be at this beach at this time. Come down for a surf. I'm no good at surfing, but I'll give it a go. And then afterwards, we'll grab a coffee and just have a chat, and we can nurture these friendships that aren't based around anything. And so that was a positive as well. But then if all that's not working, there's this thing called therapy, which isn't as confronting as it sounds, because it's actually a place where it's safe. There's a lot of confidentiality around it. There's a lot of regulation around it. But if you get that right therapist, and it takes a while to find the right person to talk to, you can share almost anything in the world and know that it's not going out of those four walls. And you can finally start to unload these past traumas. You can start to grieve these past traumas that you've been refraining from grieving on. And you can start to get better. And then you can start to live more mindfully. You can see things as more positive or brighter, or maybe you can start putting goals in place and ticking off goals and achieving things and feeling like you're actually giving back to the world instead of just taking from it. And so this wonderful thing called therapy is out there and it's available. You just got to actually open the door. You got to actually walk up to the door and knock on it and say, can I come in?
Yeah. I think a part of that too is first you have to admit that you need help. And then once you do that, because that's the hardest part, especially as men, we don't like to admit that we need help. We don't like to admit that we're hurting. And I think those are two things that you have to be very, very true and honest with yourself to be open to receive the necessary support and encouragement that you need in order to start the healing process. A lot of people get stuck because healing is hard. A lot of people think that the trauma was hard. The healing is hard because it's so revealing, right? And that contributes to healing your mental health as well, right? And again, I was just talking with a young lady, and she had been in probably 10, maybe 12 really bad relationships. I told her, I said, look here. I said, I watched you just bounce around from guy to guy to guy. Every guy that you pick always are the same. They're, they're no good, right? I said, but the problem is that I don't think it's them. She goes, well, I was like, no, I don't think it's them. I think it's you. Because I'm looking at the caliber of people that would like to be with you. Now look at the caliber of men that you choose. These are all your choices. They all have the same similar traits. And I said, instead of jumping into the next relationship and watching that crumble, I think you should start to heal. Work on your mental health. Work on your emotional health. Work on your heart health before you get into another one. Because when you heal, you tend to do things a lot better. You tend to make a lot better choices, right? Because you know you don't want to do this anymore. You don't want the same things. The definition of sanity, that's the complete definition. Doing the same things over and over, expecting different results, right? You know what I'm saying? Watch, rinse, repeat, same thing. You know, and I always encourage people to heal. Take the time to heal. Don't bounce around from thing to thing or person to person. Take the time to heal, because when you start to heal, you tend not to tolerate what you done before, and that goes for men and women of both. You know what I'm saying? And when we talk about toxic masculinity and toxic feminine energy and things like that, you have to be careful how we label that too, because not everything is toxic, right? You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people are just dealing with trauma. The toxicness, and I was just talking to somebody about this earlier. Sometimes the toxic energy, there's a thin line. And you have to be really careful of what you call toxic and what you can identify as trauma. Right? You know what I'm saying? Because one is going to need a different sort of approach in order to heal from it than the other one would. Yeah. And the one that needs a different approach is the narcissist, right? We can all talk about the narcissist. The narcissistic ways are freaking toxic, right? You know what I'm saying? They don't care nothing about us. They jack us all up. Trust me, I know. I've been there. Haven't been there, brother. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not getting my butt whooped no more. We gonna have to back up off this one. But no, oh man, brother.
It's so important to heal. Like, we look at it. We look at our bodies. If we look at our bodies as one thing, we often separate the physical and the mental aspect of our bodies. And for guys listening, look at it as if your car. Most guys have a car, or they like cars, or whatever. You don't have to like cars to have a car, but you would take it to the mechanic every year to get a service, and it keeps it on the road. It keeps you going from A to B.
Right.
And it's the same like if for our physical health as well. We go to the doctor maybe once a year, get a health check, and maybe if we've injured our hand or our arm or our leg or whatever, maybe it's sport or a work injury, we might go to a physio or we might go get an X-ray. We do the things for our physical health just like we do for our car. We keep the car on the road, essentially. Mm-hmm. It's the same with our mental health. Our mental health is just like the electronics in our car, essentially. It's the things that go from from the radio to the dash to the engine and all that type of stuff. It's just the wiring. And so looking after our mental health is just as important as our physical health, just like it would be going to get your car serviced, whether it's an auto electrician or whether it's a mechanic doing the nuts and bolts and stuff like that. And so look at it from that perspective and realize, you know what, I am one body. Why am I separating the mental aspect? Why am I avoiding this stuff? Because this is the stuff that makes life beautiful. This is the stuff that gives us the ability to look at another person and go, Tony, you're an amazing person to have this conversation with. Or you look at your son and go, what a beautiful boy that I'm nurturing into a man one day and loving to see him grow. Or look at this awesome surf that's coming this morning, the next wave, and I'm just about to get pummeled by because I can't quite stand up yet. But look, this is the thing that shows us the beauty in the world. This is the thing that allows us to, manage our days, to problem solve, to manage our finances, to conceptualize the world, to write music, to paint art. This is the thing that allows all that. So why aren't we fine-tuning it by going and seeing a doctor or even just having a chat with somebody with a good head on their shoulders? Like it could be a friend or a family member, or therapy. Therapy is not something that you slap a Band-Aid on. It can be a long-term thing where you're in maintenance mode. It's like that mechanic. You just go there for maintenance, regular tune-ups, get the stuff off your chest, get a few tools and tips, and then off you go. And so for me, that's what I do, is I look forward to the guys that work with me to get to that maintenance period, because we've done the hard stuff. Now they're living the good stuff. And then I also do that with my own therapist. So as a lived experience therapist, I still go to therapy and I see people to talk about my stuff, because I know what it's like to bottle it all up. And I don't want this car to break down. I need it to keep going, because now I've got a small business, got a young family I've got to feed. I need to keep things moving. I can't just fall into complete heap that I may have done previously. In fact, I did do that in 2020 when I burnt out because I was trying to do it all myself. The whole purpose of therapy is so that you don't have to do it by yourself. You've got someone who's there like a coach to coach you through that difficult play that you're about to go through.
Mm-hmm. Wow, man. I could talk to you forever. I could, man. So I told you we was going to have a great time, right?
Yes.
But as we get to wrap this up, how can people find you, brother? How can people
all over the web. Hopefully my SEO is working on my website. But it's www.mindful-men.com.au, and that'll access for anyone in Australia who's listening my therapy stuff because I can only practice in Australia. But also my social media. So I've got the Mindful Men podcast, which I do weekly, having chats just like this with people from all over the world. And then also all my social media as well. So the website's the best place.
All right. That's freaking awesome. Now, one more thing. If you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
Oh, a few things came to mind immediately. I think for the context for guys, nothing changes if nothing changes. It's a simple affirmation. You could be thinking, you want change, but unless you actually do the change, like you've checked yourself, but unless you actually start walking the walk, then nothing will ever change. And so you've got to kind of put some things into action. And there's ways that you can do that. We've just had New Year's period, for example. So New Year's resolutions are on everyone's minds. But maybe instead of a resolution, maybe just make it your purpose this year. My purpose this year is to get well, or to give up drinking, or to give up drugs, or to maybe just be more present with my kids and not be on my phone all the time. Maybe I'm going to put my phone as an everyday thing on the kitchen counter, and I'm not going to look at it between these hours because I just want to be there for my kids. Whatever's going on for you in your lives, make a purposeful action and promise yourself, because you don't want to break a promise to anyone. So maybe promise yourself, I promise myself I'm going to do X, Y, or Z this year. But unless you make the change, then you'll still be stuck in the 2023 way of living, or the 2022. Or if you're really grieving, historical trauma, maybe you're still stuck in the 90s or the 80s or the early 2000s with your mindset. It's time to leapfrog back into 2024.
So I love that, man. Sorry. Oh man, like I said, we got to do this again, man. We definitely got to do this again.
Absolutely, I love it. Yeah,
I love it, man. I love it. Thank you. I want to say thank you for being on the show today, first and foremost. You know what I'm saying? Thank you for such an awesome conversation. So insightful, man. So many things that if people are listening that you put out there, and hopefully they're grabbing those nuggets and putting them in their pocket and saving them for a time when they can actually, where they can use them and things like that. And for everyone who have been tuning in today, I want to say thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for all the support that you guys have given us. And, I am Tony Lynch. And as always, if you guys haven't already, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And as always, if you know anybody who can benefit from these conversations that we have, please share this with them. Simon, again, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for being so awesome, man. And for everyone else, this is going to conclude our episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast today. We will see you guys again. Until next time, we love you. Thank you for your support. Peace.